Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Graham Watts. I'm the Director of Operations. This is the second in a series of report and report writer training for the BeyondPay software. It is intended to be actually an introduction, not a training. For about half an hour, I'll go over some introductory ideas of how custom column works, and it's intended to get you thinking and to ask follow-up questions. You do not have to have listened to the previous training, which was 1 month ago today. On February 13th, we did a reports overview. If you haven't listened to it, that's okay. This report training can still have value to you. And if you'd like us to send you a YouTube link to the previous training, we can do that. You will also be sent a YouTube link to this training afterwards, and you can listen to both of them. And I want to take a brief moment to explain that we at BeyondPay, your CSR, myself, we are always willing to help you write, diagnose, and manage your reports, your custom columns, and all things BeyondPay. So please continue to use support@beyondpay.com. Ask whatever questions you have. And these webinars are intended to, again, be short-term overview to get you thinking and to know the right questions to ask, and hopefully get you on the path to writing your own as you feel you can do to your own comfort level. So that being said, I'll go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to navigate to my employee's employee information screen. This is something, we are in a demo environment. This isn't real information, and this is one of the more common screens within the BeyondPay system, and it's where I want to start showing you how to write the custom columns. It would be impossible to cover all of the options in 30 minutes, so I'm going to do introductory information.
Graham, we're still looking at the agenda right now.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. We are now looking at a BeyondPay screen, which is a demo environment, and it's the My Employees employee information. And in the announcements for the webinar, the language was, is there a field you just can't seem to find in BeyondPay? And while we have access to almost every single data element in our system, there is an occasion where you're going to want to write a custom field. So a little bit of review from last time. I'm going to select columns, and I'm going to bring in the column known as employment length. And again, the button clicks I'm going through now are in the original training that we can send you if you haven't previously written reports or reviewed that training. Once I bring in an employment length data element, it clearly tells you how long Jennifer Aniston has worked for this company, but it's in more of a language-based 32 years, 11 months. And I thought this would be a good introduction to how a custom column can work. Unfortunately, this is the only onboard employment length field within the BeyondPay system that is readily available, but you can certainly write one starting with custom columns. I'm going to go up to Settings, Custom Settings, and select the custom columns. You can have as many as 25 custom columns in each report or each view. I'm going to check the first box to open up the entry location for that custom column. And the first step is to show you where the available functions are. By clicking on functions, the top selectable button, you get introduced to all of the different variable formulas available to you in the BeyondPay software. The one I'm going to use just for demonstration purposes, you'd have to look, is date diff. That means show me the difference between two dates. And that's where I'll pause and show you that the left is intended to be an actual clickable link to insert the formula. The right is a text-based version of how the formula works, and it's how I actually start writing. So this date diff is saying logically, what is the difference between January 31st, 2011 and January 31st and January 1st, which is obviously 31 days. If you were to copy this exact formula and you don't want to grab the equals is intended for your use, I'm going to copy this exact formula and I'm going to insert it into the body. And I'm actually going to title it days worked. You can give your custom formula a plain English title in the report, and I'm labeling it that as such for now. In order to bring it into the report, this has created it. You have to navigate over to the columns tab, which is 2 tabs away. And you can either search for it using the magnifying glass, or it will always be at the bottom of your data. You can move it over and then up to the location where you'd like it to exist. Once you click the Use Setting button, you now have a data element. I just wanted to show you that it works before we start changing it to what we want it to do. And this is how I still write these. I make sure the formula is working functionally, and then navigate back in. Settings, custom columns, and I can start changing the variables, because I don't necessarily want to know these arbitrary dates. I want to know how long they've worked there. And this is where the second button comes into play. I'm going to delete the first data element, January 31st. And I'm going to ask it to tell me the date hired by clicking on columns, the third button. This will present to you the number of data elements available to you, the nearly thousands of them. You can search with a Control F. BeyondPay is a cloud-based software. It exists in a browser, and just like any browser, you can search on the page and look for the data you're looking for, or you can scroll down throughout the slider bar and find it. For now, the left side, I found the data element known as employee date hired. The left is the actual required field. The right is a plain text description of what you're looking for. So I'm going to use employee date hired. I've copied it to my clipboard, and I'm going to paste it where January 31st used to exist. Placement matters, obviously. And I don't want to know how long this individual has worked from date of hire to this arbitrary date. I want to know how long they've worked actually through today. I've deleted the element. I go back into functions, and I continue to scroll, and we will see that there is an actual wildcard for today. It's picking up the system date on board, and it's going to compare real time their date hired to today. By simply hitting Use Settings, it will update the data where it's now relevant. You see the data becoming variable, and you can see that 32 years and 11 months is 12,000 days, and so on as you go down. This type of data becomes relevant if you were interested in how many days has somebody worked. I'm going to proceed to now divide that by 365 so we know how many years they worked. Again, settings, custom settings. And this is where I would recommend writing in pieces. Write it incrementally as you go. You can always write extra columns and then delete them when you no longer need them. But I like to progress through so I can see that one data part is working, so I can be sure the second data part is working as I progress. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I will label the second one, which I've checked off and enabled the second custom column, as years worked. And now I want to proceed to divide that previous number by 365. Again, I'll use the functions column. I will scroll down to the mathematical section, and it says divide. Fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, they are not written like Excel for those of you that use Excel all day. It's a very similar syntax, but it is not the same exact syntax as Excel. So there is a bit of a learning curve in getting used to copying and pasting. And again, you can copy from the right or the left. You can copy this one, which would show you the number 4, or you can copy the actual formula itself, which is divide number divided by number. I'm going to bring this formula into the second custom column we've created, and again, start changing the variables as we did before. And the reason I like to write them incrementally is because what I want to do is change the days worked to years worked, so I know what both my variables are. I'm going to ultimately divide by 365 1/4. The 0.25 accounts for leap year. So what do I want to divide by 365 1/4? I want to divide their number of days worked. I've already calculated that data above. So it becomes as simple as copying the formula that you saved and know is working to your clipboard and replacing the data element. So this is where we begin to use two different formulas, using one as a placeholder and the other as the division. So this new formula we've written is saying, take their date hired, tell me the difference between today and that date, and then divide by 365. Again, we have to bring this column into the report by clicking on the Columns tab, by navigating all the way to the bottom or using the magnifying glass. And once I move it over and then up, I will juxtapose it. And you'll notice that the custom name you give the column doesn't retain at this level. I will show you where it does, but in the short term, you'll have to look for the word custom column. When I hit Use Settings, you'll now see that both custom columns exist. We retained the days worked, and the next column over is dividing the days worked by 365.25. So just using your eye, you can see that 32 years and 11 months and 26 days is almost 33. And it's a more numeric representation that this individual has worked here for 32.99 years. You can format this data one of two ways. I can show you inside of the settings, custom columns. And while we were writing that formula, we could have specified that we want it to be numeric data. And then within the numeric data, you can start picking different formats that are available to you, as you might not want to have it going out to 8 or 10 decimal places. And this one is rounding because of the format I picked. I should have picked one that's a little closer, but this is now showing you a numeric representation of how long they've worked, and it's not dependent on this employment length column being existent. This tends to make the report look a little busy. It's harder to use if and when you were to export. So I'll go ahead and delete it, leaving just our two custom columns. We have a days worked column, which is 12,000 days, and we have a years worked column. You will notice that the filters that are on board in all BeyondPay reports are not currently present. This is something that our tech support and our engineering team is working on. We are looking to be able to sort and filter by custom columns. For now, unfortunately, it's not an available option, but you certainly can and should export out to Excel if you want to retain the data that way and manipulate the data that way. You can sort by other columns present in the report. For example, date hired. If I sort descending or ascending, you will see that the formula follows the appropriate data element. You just can't sort by the field itself. So this is good, relevant data and very useful. And this numeric date difference is one of the more common quick fields we add. We could even cut and paste and send this to you on demand, and you can start inserting it into various reports if you'd like to use it, or it would be good practice to practice writing it yourself. Another further application is to then start analyzing that data. And one of the most common Excel formulas that people use is if, and I thought it would be relevant to show an if statement within BeyondPay. It becomes very quick to have saved data at your fingertips that's analyzing. So for the sake of training, I want to identify people that have worked with your company more than 15 years. Perhaps there's a service award or another level of vacation, and it would be helpful to have a very quick data element that identifies people that have been with your company more than 15 years. Again, settings, custom settings. Within the custom column, we're going to add a third column, and we're going to call it 15 years. I will navigate to the functions, and I'll look for the if statement. It actually happens to be the second one we find. And I'm going to take a moment and pause and read the if statement that is the example they're giving us. It's saying very basically, if 1 equals 1, return the number 10. If it does not, return the number 20. Now, obviously, this formula will never return the number 20 because 1 will always equal 1. But I'm going to use it as my starting point. If 1 equals 1, give me the answer 10. If it does not, give me the answer 20. I'm going to insert that. And I'm going to start changing the variables. And it's going to say, if the formula above equals 15. And I know that can look busy, but I copied and pasted. So within the parentheses, it's saying it's comparing two data elements. Does the formula above equals 15? If it does, put the word tenure. If it does not, do nothing. Nothing in quotes, nothing between the quotes means nothing. Understood. So I want to show you, this is a basic if now, and we're going to get a number of false positives. I'm sorry, I forgot to bring the field into the report. You can also bring custom columns with the select columns as you would all the other static data elements. You'll notice that 15 years is returning all negatives because I didn't ask it if it's over 15 years. I asked it if it equals 15 years. And nobody on the payroll currently has worked there for exactly 15 years. So we have to add one more data element, and I'll proceed. And I know that we're getting pretty lengthy, and it's intended to illustrate the compounding use of showing multiple formulas and building them as you go. So I'll open one more custom column, and I'm going to introduce us to the idea of maximum and minimum. It happens to be the fourth one, and this is a very generically asking, what is bigger, 50,000 or 60,000? The answer will always be 60,000. The one below it is the exact opposite. Which is smaller, 50,000 or 60,000? So I'll go ahead and use max for demonstration purposes. And this formula is very basically asking, tell me which number is bigger. Rather than compare two integers, we want to compare which is bigger. The employee's years worked, which was this formula above, and that's why I gave it that name. Which is bigger, their years worked or 15 years. And what it's actually saying is, which is the bigger of the two? If the person's worked there for longer than 15 years, it'll tell you how long they've worked there. If they've worked there for less than 15 years, it will simply return 15, not how long they've actually worked, because that's what the formula is calling for. It's saying which is bigger, their tenure or the number 15, which we picked for the demonstration purposes. Columns, always at the bottom. I'm going to return that temporary column we created. And now we're starting to identify everyone that has over 15 years tenure versus those that didn't. And again, 15 means they're less than 15, and we've basically returned their data unformatted because I didn't format that column. So the last piece is to bring it all together and concatenate all of the formulas. Settings, custom settings. I'm going to bring in one more custom column, and I'm going to start using all the pieces that I've shown you in the past. I'm going to start with the if. I'll do another column just for redundancy purposes. I'm going to copy the if equals formula, which is the second one down. And this is the formula that said if 1 equals 1, do 10, otherwise do 20. Well, I don't want to know if 1 equals 1. I want to know if their total tenure versus 15 years. And this is where what you delete and what you place becomes paramount. The formula above was returning their actual tenure versus 15. So this is saying if the formula above, if the bigger of the two, which is the formula and above, and 15 equals 15. In other words, you're less than, I apologize, if the bigger of the two is 15, and I actually might be writing this backwards, but I'll show you how it works. This is taking all of the data elements and replacing the pieces. And it's saying, if you look at how long they've been there versus 15, if they're higher than 15, then they have tenure. If they're less, then they don't. Again, bring the column in, move it over. Okay, I did write it backwards, so forgive me. You'll notice how all the people that don't have tenure are the ones that I'm falsely identifying. Settings, custom settings, custom columns. And I'm going to reverse the variables. I'm going to say that if you've been there less than 15 years, do nothing. Otherwise, show me the word tenure. So now you'll notice that the 3 top employees who have been there for 33, 16, and 15 years, they're being identified as tenured employees. And we don't need to use the max 15. When you write in succession, I'm bringing in each piece of the calculation just for the time being, but I can start to drop out the unused or unneeded columns. And now even days worked becomes irrelevant. And now I've returned a data element that Jennifer Aniston, yes, we know she's been there since 1985, but we have a numeric representation that's 33 years, and it will real time, based on the calendar date, start pinging the word tenure or whatever you chose in order to quickly identify if you were to want to export or just pull this report up. And the last part of the training that I wanted to show you is what happens when you make a mistake. You're writing these formulas and you're copying and pasting, and it's very common that you copy pasted something in the wrong syntax, or you placed it in the wrong, and I'll go down to the bottom one, which is the most complex. Just one wrong parenthesis, for example, will return a syntax error, and it's not going to specifically tell you where it is. I'm sure somewhere there's coders and people that can translate this data element and help you understand where you forgot your parenthesis or where you made a syntax error. But much like Excel that tells you made a mistake, which is a little bit better identifying where your mistake is, the BeyondPay software is going to let you know or make a mistake. And that is one of the primary reasons why even now I suggest and myself write them in pieces, because having made a mistake in the final error, you have all the incremental pieces above where you can start putting back together the formula and get the data you were looking for. So with that, I'll just end on the same note I started with, and that is that to train to do custom columns within a half hour or even 3 hours would probably be a pretty monumental task. The point of these webinars is to introduce you to the concepts, have you go through the YouTube or the recording for as fast or as slow as you want, and get you thinking of which questions you'd like to ask, or which formulas you'd like to try yourself, and then ask for help along the way. So thus concludes the webinar. I do see that we have some questions and answers. I will defer to Kate Higgins.
Okay, so thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
The first question that we got just says, and you may just want to kind of recap this, just explain it again, not show it, but maybe just explain it. Can we not do an if formula that is greater than or less than or greater than or equal to?
Yes. So the short answer is obviously yes. And even in the training, I perhaps showed that out of order. I showed you the if and then showed you the max and brought it back around. So I'm guessing that question was posed before I got there. But the short answer is absolutely, and that's where we ended up. So you can write an if that is comparing a max to the if. Max and min is greater than or less than. And then or equal to if you want to have that exact formula, what if it's exactly 15? The answer is yes, and I would like to take that offline rather than do it right now, but you can absolutely write equal or greater to, not just equal or not just greater.
Excellent. Okay, we got another question in here that I'll follow up with, specific to one of the reports in the system, the employee directory. Can certain columns be brought into that specific report? So, rather than diving into that right now, since we don't have a lot of time, I'll go ahead and we'll be sure to follow up with you specifically about that.
Correct. Yep, and I'll answer it very briefly that it is a true statement that every single data element is not 100% available at every portion of the system. There are certain HR data elements that might not come into payroll. There are certain payroll elements that might not come into time and attendance. And that is the point of custom columns. Very often you can write one yourself, or very often you can work with BeyondPay and we can help you with that. But that specific type of question was covered in the first webinar, which is it's still a relevant question, and it's always worth it to bring it back up. That what if data doesn't exist in the report I'm looking for? The secondary option becomes, can I write it into a custom column? Is there a way for me to bring it in? Or is it something we have to work with BeyondPay engineering to help you fix? But in conclusion, custom columns are not Excel. I personally wish they were, but they work very well. We are always willing to write them for you or help you diagnose the ones you wrote. And we're hoping to continue to have our clients, to your level of comfort and level of speed, accessing and using every element of our system and putting your data at your fingertips, and through your own work or through asking BeyondPay to do it, getting the data you need in and out of the system that works seamlessly with all other platforms, Excel and text, and helping you get solutions to make your day easier rather than managing outside of the system. The more often you can be in one location, the quicker and more efficient we all are, and that is the intent of the webinars. So I think I gave us 3 bonus minutes. I finished up in just that much more time. So if there's no more questions, and Kate, I don't know that I see any more coming in.
No, the only other thing is somebody had asked previously, our division and multiplication, adding, is that the only numeric functions that we have available in the custom columns?
Oh, sorry, correct. Yeah, no, the answer is no. It's within the functions. So again, it's settings, custom settings, and functions. And they do have category headings. I may have failed to mention that. So there is a numeric functions section, and you can see the basic arithmetic, add, divide, subtract. And maybe it's easier for you to look. This is another pro tip. You can copy this with your mouse, and I always copy these out and paste it into Excel, and it just becomes easier to view it on one screen instead of having to navigate this way. And the same even applies to columns, which is a much more robust and detailed listing. If you want, I always tend to start from the bottom and go all the way up. If you wanted to start all the way from the bottom and copy up, copying and pasting all of your variables into a spreadsheet, all of your functions into a spreadsheet, should you so desire, gives you a more one-stop shop versus having to navigate within this smaller window.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And please do reach out to us at support@beyondpay.com with your very specific questions, any questions at all. If you would like to discuss your BeyondPay account not related to reports, we are always available. We are happy to help, and your guys' desire to get into the system and write these reports is something that I personally and all of our staff would love to walk you through and show you just what we can do. So, as always, thank you for being a BeyondPay client, and thank you so much for your time and attention.